The December wind cut through Lark Hollow like a dull blade, carrying with it the promise of harder days ahead. When the stagecoach rolled to a stop outside Murdoch's general store, the few townspeople brave enough to face the cold paused in their business to watch. Strangers were rare in these parts, especially this late in the season when most folks had already hunkered down for winter. Clara Jo Whitley stepped down from the coach with a deliberate care, her worn leather boots finding purchase on the frozen mud. At 32, she stood taller than most women, nearly matching the height of the driver who handed down her single traveling case. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe knot beneath a plain bonnet, and her gray wool dress hung loose on her frame, suggesting recent weight loss or clothes borrowed from someone else. "That'll be $4, ma'am," the driver said, already eyeing the darkening sky with concern. "Storm's coming in. You got somewhere to stay." Clara counted out the coins with steady fingers, her movements precise and economical. "I have employment arranged," she said, her voice low and measured. "The Callahan Ranch." The driver's eyebrows rose slightly. "Jack Callahan's place. That's a good 2 miles out. And like I said, storm's coming." He glanced at her thin coat dubiously. "You sure about this, ma'am?" "Quite sure." Clara tucked the letter of introduction deeper into her pocket, feeling its reassuring weight. The advertisement in the Kansas City paper had been brief. Kitchen help needed. Room and board provided. Apply with references to J. Callahan, Lark Hollow, Wyoming Territory. She'd written immediately, desperate for distance from Missouri and everything it held. As the stagecoach rumbled away, Clara became acutely aware of the eyes upon her. Through the frost-etched window of the general store, she could see 2 women whispering behind their hands. A group of men outside the saloon had stopped their conversation to stare. She recognized the looks curiosity mixed with suspicion, the way small towns always greeted outsiders. "You, the new help for Callahan?" A gravelly voice made her turn. An older man in a shopkeeper's apron stood in the doorway of the store, squinting at her through wire spectacles. This had to be Murdoch himself. "Yes, sir," Clara replied. Murdoch looked her up and down with the frank assessment of someone who'd sized up people for decades. "You're taller than I expected, and older." Clara said nothing. She'd learned long ago that silence often served better than explanations. "Well, come on in then," Murdoch said, stepping aside. "Can't have you freezing to death before you even reach the ranch? Jack would never forgive me." The store's interior was cramped but warm, filled with the mingled scents of coffee, leather, and pickled goods. The 2 women Clara had seen through the window, one blonde and sharp-featured, the other round and rosy, made no effort to hide their scrutiny. "This is Mrs. Hollis and Mrs. Brennan," Murdoch said by way of introduction. "Ladies, this is—" He paused, realizing he didn't know her name. "Clara Whitley," she supplied quietly. "Mrs. Whitley." "The blonde woman, Mrs." Hollis repeated, her gaze dropping pointedly to Clara's ungloved left hand where no wedding ring resided. "How? Interesting. And you're to work for Mr. Callahan." "In the kitchen," Clara said, meeting the woman's eyes steadily. "As help." "Poor man." "Mrs." Brennan said with exaggerated sympathy. "Lost his wife 2 winters back, left with those 2 boys, Harold and little Sam. Such a tragedy." "Indeed." "Mrs." Hollis agreed, though her tone suggested she found it more scandalous than tragic. "A single woman, going to live in a house with a widowed man? People will talk." "People always do," Clara replied mildly, turning her attention to Murdoch. "Sir, might someone direct me to the ranch I'm expected before dark?" Murdoch cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. "My boy Tommy can take you in the wagon." "Tommy?" He hollered toward the back room. "Get the wagon ready." A gangly youth appeared, all knees and elbows and eager curiosity. While he prepared the wagon, Murdoch insisted Clara warm herself by the stove. She stood quietly, aware of the women's continued whispers but refusing to acknowledge them. She'd heard worse, endured worse. Their words were just wind. "Don't mind them," Murdoch said quietly when the women finally left. "Mrs. Hollis has had her eye on Jack Callahan since his wife passed. She's not pleased about him hiring help." Clara merely nodded. She hadn't come here to make friends or enemies. She'd come to disappear, to find a quiet corner where she could work and be left alone. The advertisement had seemed like Providence's remote location. Kitchen work, no questions asked as long as references were solid. Her former employer in Kansas City, Mrs. Pemberton, had written her a glowing letter despite Clara's sudden departure. Some women understood without being told. The wagon ride to the ranch was cold and largely silent. Tommy made a few attempts at conversation, asking where she was from and why she'd come to Wyoming. But Clara's monosyllabic responses soon discouraged him. She kept her eyes on the landscape, endless white, punctuated by dark smudges of pine and the skeletal reaches of cottonwoods along what must be a creek. The mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks lost in gathering clouds. The Callahan Ranch, when it finally came into view, was larger than she'd expected but showed signs of neglect. The main house was solid enough, built of logs and stone, but several outbuildings needed repair and the fence lines sagged in places. Smoke rose from the chimney, the only sign of life in the gathering gloom. "This is as far as I go," Tommy said, pulling up near the front porch. "Mr. Callahan don't like folks coming too close without invitation." Clara climbed down and retrieved her case. "Thank you for the ride." Tommy hesitated, then blurted out, "Ma'am, are you sure about this Mr. Callahan? He's not a bad man, but he's different since his wife died. Keeps to himself, hardly comes to town except for supplies. And those boys of his run half wild." "I'm sure," Clara said firmly. She'd dealt with difficult men before. At least this one was offering honest work and a roof overhead, not promises that turned to ash and bruises that took weeks to fade. As Tommy's wagon disappeared back down the trail, Clara approached the heavy wooden door. She knocked firmly, then waited. Long seconds passed before she heard footsteps, slow and measured. The door opened to reveal a man who could only be Jack Callahan. He was tall, taller than her by several inches, with the dark hair shot through with premature gray, and a face weathered by sun and sorrow. His eyes, a shade between brown and green, studied her with the same careful assessment she'd grown accustomed to in town. But there was no judgment in his gaze, only a weary sort of evaluation. "Miss Whitley." His voice was deep, roughened by disuse. "Yes, sir, Clara Whitley." He stepped aside to let her enter. The house's interior was dim, lit only by oil lamps and the fire crackling in the massive stone hearth. It smelled of wood smoke and something else, the particular mustiness of a house kept by men who didn't notice such things. "Boys," Jack called toward the back of the house. "Come meet Miss Whitley." Two boys appeared from what must be the kitchen, the older one perhaps 12, all sharp angles and suspicious eyes like his father. The younger, maybe 9, rounder-faced but with the same wariness. Their clothes were clean but mended, their hair in need of cutting. "This is Harold," Jack indicated the older boy. "And Sam. Boys, Miss Whitley will be helping with the cooking and housekeeping." "Ma'am," Harold said stiffly. Sam just stared. "Hello," Clara said simply. She'd learned not to push too hard with children, especially those who'd known loss. Jack showed her around briefly: kitchen, pantry, the main room that served as both dining and living area. The house was solidly built but sparse, functional rather than comfortable. Everything spoke of a woman's absence, from the bare walls to the utilitarian furniture to the way the boys' eyes kept sliding to her as if trying to place her in their motherless world. "Your room's upstairs," Jack said, leading her up narrow stairs to a small space under the eaves. It held a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair. A small window looked out toward the mountains. "It's not much, but it's warm and dry." "It's perfect," Clara said, and meant it. It was hers alone, with a door she could close and a bed no one else had claim to. After months of uncertainty, it felt like luxury. "Supper's at 6, Jack said, pausing at the door. "We don't stand on ceremony here. You cook, we eat, everyone does their share." "Questions?" "No, sir." He studied her a moment longer, and she sensed questions he wanted to ask about her lack of rings, about why a woman her age was taking servant's work in the middle of nowhere, about what she was running from, but he only nodded and left her to settle in. Clara unpacked her few belongings slowly. 2 dresses, undergarments, a nightgown, her mother's Bible, though she rarely opened it anymore, a silver brush that was the only valuable thing she'd kept. Everything she owned fit in one case with room to spare. Through the thin window, she watched the snow begin to fall, fat flakes that would soon cover her tracks from town. Good, let it snow. Let it bury everything that passed, the bruises that had faded but left their mark on her spirit, the baby that had never drawn breath, the wedding ring she'd sold for stage fare. She'd told everyone she just needed to sleep, but what she really needed was to disappear, to become nothing more than a pair of hands in a kitchen, a silent figure who asked for nothing beyond room and board. The Callahan Ranch, with its taciturn owner and motherless boys, seemed as good a place as any to practice being invisible. The wind howled around the eaves as Clara descended to start supper, ready to begin her new life of cooking, cleaning, and carefully maintained distance. She didn't know yet that some distances were meant to be crossed, or that a man who'd buried his heart with his wife might recognize a kindred spirit in a woman trying to bury hers. For now, it was enough to have arrived, to have found a place where her height and her silence and her story that she'd never tell might not matter, where she could work and be still and let the winter do what winters did, cover everything in white and make it clean. The first week at the Callahan Ranch taught Clara the rhythm of a house shaped by loss. Jack rose before dawn, the creak of his boots on the stairs serving as her alarm. By the time she descended to the kitchen, he'd already have coffee brewing strong and bitter, the way men without women learn to make it. He'd nod his acknowledgement, pour 2 cups without asking if she wanted any, then disappear to tend the livestock while she started breakfast. The boys were harder to predict. Harold, at 12, carried himself with the weight of premature responsibility. He'd appear in the kitchen fully dressed, hair combed, ready to help his father with morning chores, but sometimes Clara caught him staring at nothing, his face bearing an expression too old for his years. Sam, younger and less guarded, would stumble down later, hair sticking up at odd angles, still clutching whatever small treasure he'd fallen asleep with, a carved wooden horse, a smooth stone, once a dried butterfly that crumbled at Clara's gentle touch. "Pa doesn't like us being late," Harold informed her on the 3rd morning when she'd suggested Sam could sleep a bit longer. "Says routine keeps a man steady." Clara had merely nodded and set out Sam's breakfast to keep warm. She understood the comfort of routine, how it could hold you together when everything else threatened to fall apart. The work itself was straightforward cooking, cleaning, mending clothes that had been patched so many times the original fabric was hard to find. The kitchen became her domain, and she set about making it functional. Jack had done his best, she could see that, but there were gaps only a woman noticed. No proper dish towels, just torn up old shirts, supplies stored haphazardly, flour next to soap, preserves shoved behind pots. She reorganized quietly, careful not to criticize the previous system or lack thereof. "Don't need to do all that," Jack said one evening, finding her scrubbing years of soot from behind the stove. "Hired you for cooking, not—" He gestured vaguely at her efforts. "Clean stove cooks better," Clara replied without looking up. It was more words than she usually offered, and she felt his surprise in the silence that followed. "Suit yourself," he said finally, and she heard something that might have been approval in his tone. The house revealed its secrets slowly. A woman's apron still hanging on a peg behind the pantry door. Curtains in the boys' room embroidered with tiny flowers, now faded and dusty. A rocking chair in the corner of the main room that no one used, its runners worn smooth. Clara cleaned around these remnants carefully, understanding they were memorials as much as objects. She learned that Harold wouldn't eat carrots unless they were hidden in stew, that Sam was allergic to wool and broke out in rashes if his shirts weren't cotton, that Jack took his coffee black in the morning but added a spoon of sugar after dinner when he thought no one was looking. Small intimacies accumulated despite the careful distance they all maintained. "Your biscuits are different than Ma's," Sam announced one evening, then looked stricken as if he'd broken some unspoken rule. The table went silent. Harold glared at his brother while Jack's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Different how?" Clara asked calmly, continuing to eat as if the boy hadn't just summoned a ghost to the table. Sam considered this seriously. "Yours are taller. Ma's were flatter but had more butter flavor. Would you like me to add more butter next time?" The boy shook his head. "No, ma'am, I like them tall." The tension eased, and dinner resumed. Later, while she washed dishes, Jack lingered in the kitchen, unusual for him. "Sarah used to forget the baking powder," he said quietly. "Never could get her biscuits to rise proper. Boys ate them anyway. Swore they were the best in Wyoming." He paused, seeming surprised at his own words. "Haven't spoken of her much. The boys don't like it." "Sometimes speaking makes the missing worse," Clara offered, understanding all too well. Jack studied her then, really looked at her for perhaps the first time since she'd arrived. "You lost someone." It wasn't a question. Clara's hand stilled in the dishwater, but she didn't turn around. "Most folks have, one way or another." He didn't press, and she was grateful. They stood in comfortable silence until she finished the dishes. Then he bid her good night and retreated to wherever he spent his evenings, his room or the barn. She wasn't sure which. The second week brought the first real test of their arrangement. Clara woke to the sound of coughing, harsh, wet sounds that sent her reaching for her wrapper before she fully registered what she was hearing. Sam's room. She found the boy burning with fever, Harold hovering anxiously by the bed. "He gets sick sometimes," Harold said, trying for matter of fact but failing. "Ma used to make a tea." "Fetch your father," Clara said, already feeling the boy's forehead, checking his throat. "Then bring me hot water, clean cloths, and whatever medicine you have." Jack appeared moments later, took one look at his son, and the careful control he maintained cracked visibly. "It's like before," he said hoarsely. "Sarah got sick like this, and then—" "This is croup, not what took your wife," Clara said firmly, recognizing the distinctive barking cough. "I've seen it before. We need steam, honey, and patience. He'll be fine." For the next 2 days, Clara barely left Sam's side. She created attentive sheets over his bed, filling it with steam from boiling water. She spooned honey and warm water between his lips when he could manage it. Sang soft songs her mother had sung to her when the boy grew frightened in the night. Jack stayed close, following her instructions without question, while Harold fetched and carried whatever was needed. On the third morning, Sam's fever broke. He opened clear eyes and asked for breakfast in a hoarse but steady voice. Harold actually smiled. "And Jack?" Jack looked at Clara as if seeing her anew. "Thank you," he said simply, but the words carried weight. "It's what anyone would do." Clara deflected. "No," Jack said quietly. "It's not." Something shifted after that. The careful boundaries remained, but they were more permeable. Jack began taking his evening coffee in the kitchen while Clara mended clothes, comfortable silence filling the space between them. Harold started helping with dishes without being asked, and Sam took to following Clara around. Peppering her with questions, she answered when she could, deflected when she couldn't. "Why don't you have any children, Miss Clara?" Sam asked one afternoon while she taught him to fold napkins properly. "Sam," Harold hissed. "That's not polite." "It's all right," Clara said, though her hands stilled for a moment. "Sometimes what we want and what we get are different things. Like how we wanted Ma to stay, but she had to go to heaven. Something like that. Yes." Sam nodded solemnly, accepting this wisdom, while Clara swallowed past the tightness in her throat. The ranch itself demanded constant work. Jack managed the cattle and horses with help from Harold and 2 hired men who came by day but lived in town. Clara expanded her duties beyond the house, helping with the kitchen garden plot, now dormant under snow but needing planning for spring. She mended harnesses and helped with the accounts when she discovered Jack's arithmetic was solid, but his penmanship made records hard to decipher. "Don't know how you read my writing," he admitted one evening as she transcribed his notes into the ledger. "I've seen worse," Clara said. "My father was a doctor. His prescription notes looked like chicken scratches in a dust bath." It was the first piece of her past she'd offered, and Jack absorbed it without comment, though she saw him file the information away. Town trips were infrequent but necessary. Jack usually went alone, but as winter deepened and the roads grew treacherous, he began taking Clara along to help with supplies. The townspeople's reactions ranged from curious to disapproving, but Clara had learned to armor herself with indifference. "That's her," she heard Mrs. Hollis whisper to another woman outside the mercantile. "Living in sin with that man, mark my words." "We should pray for her," the other woman replied. "And those poor motherless boys." Clara selected her purchases calmly, as if she hadn't heard, but Jack had. His jaw was rigid as he loaded the wagon, his movements sharp with suppressed anger. "Don't let them bother you," Clara said as they drove home. "Their words can't hurt us unless we let them." "Doesn't make it right," Jack said. "You've done nothing but help my family. Sarah would have—" He stopped, shook his head. "Sarah would have liked you." It was the highest compliment he could have paid her, and Clara felt its worth. As November turned to December, the ranch settled into new patterns. Clara had transformed the house subtly cleaner, warmer somehow, though she'd added nothing decorative. It was in the small things, curtains washed and pressed, floors that no longer gritted under boots, meals that appeared regularly and hot, clothes mended before the holes grew large. "Feels different," Harold said one evening, looking around as if trying to identify what had changed. "Good different or bad different?" Clara asked, genuinely curious about his answer. The boy considered carefully. "Good. I think, like the house is waking up again." Jack looked up from his coffee, met Clara's eyes across the room. Something passed between them, understanding, perhaps, or recognition. 2 people who'd learned to live with loss, finding that surviving together was marginally easier than surviving alone. But Clara remembered her purpose here to work, to be quiet, to need nothing beyond what was offered. The warmth growing in this house was dangerous. She'd felt warmth before, trusted it, and learned that warmth could burn as surely as cold could freeze. Still, when Sam crept to her chair that evening with his reading primer, asking quietly if she'd help him with his letters, she made room for him. When Harold offered to teach her to whittle, Pa taught me, and his PA taught him, she accepted the knife and block of wood. When Jack mentioned that the roof of the chicken coop needed fixing before the next snow, she offered to help hold boards while he hammered. "Just work," she reminded herself. "Just a job. Don't need more than that." But needs and wants, as she'd told Sam, were different things entirely. And in the warm kitchen of the Callahan Ranch, with snow falling soft outside and 3 people who were learning to trust her steady presence, Clara began to wonder if what she needed and what she wanted might be more complicated than she'd let herself believe. The storm arrived with a vengeance 3 weeks before Christmas, howling down from the mountains like a living thing. Clara woke to the sound of wood splintering and Sam's frightened cry. She grabbed her wrapper and rushed upstairs to find snow swirling through a gaping hole where part of the roof had been. "Get the boys downstairs," Jack shouted over the wind, already wrestling with a piece of canvas to cover the breach. "Harold, help me secure this." Clara gathered Sam, who was shivering in his nightshirt, and ushered him down to the kitchen. She stirred the banked fire back to life and wrapped the boy in a quilt while Jack and Harold fought the storm above. "Is our house breaking?" Sam asked, teeth chattering. "Just a bit of damage," Clara soothed, heating milk on the stove. "Your father will fix it." An hour later, Jack and Harold stumbled down, covered in snow and exhausted. The canvas patch would hold temporarily, but the attic room was uninhabitable. Clara's few possessions, mercifully, had escaped the worst of it. Though everything was damp and cold, Jack surveyed the situation grimly. "Can't repair it properly until the storm passes. Could be days." He looked at Clara, something like apology in his eyes. "The storage room off the kitchen has a cot. It's not much, but it's dry." Clara nodded, already calculating. The storage room was tiny, barely larger than a closet, and cold despite sharing a wall with the kitchen chimney. But it would serve. "That won't do," Harold said unexpectedly. "It's freezing in there. She'll catch her death." "I'll manage," Clara began, but Jack was already shaking his head. "Boy's right. In weather like this," he paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "You can sleep in the main room. We'll put the cot by the fire, just until the roof's fixed." It was practical, sensible, but Clara saw the townspeople's whispers made manifest in the arrangement. A single woman sleeping in the same room as a widowed man. Even with his children present, even with necessity driving it, the impropriety loomed large. "I'll be fine in the storage room," she insisted. "No," Jack said firmly. "I won't have you freezing because of what people might say. They talk regardless." He began moving furniture to make space near the hearth. Just sleeping arrangements, nothing more. That first night established a pattern that would continue throughout the storm. Clara retired early, settling onto the cot fully dressed save for her boots, pulling a heavy quilt to her chin. Jack stayed up late, banking the fire and checking the windows against the wind. Sometimes she'd wake to find him adding wood to the fire, moving quietly to avoid disturbing anyone. "Just sleep," she murmured one night when she caught him watching the flames, his expression distant. He glanced at her, a wry smile tugging at his mouth. "Darlin, try me," he said softly, the unexpected endearment catching them both off guard. He cleared his throat. I don't sleep much anyway, storm or no storm." Clara understood. Sleep brought dreams, and dreams brought memories better left undisturbed. "The fire's warmth helps," she offered. "That it does," he agreed, settling into his chair with his coffee. They developed an unspoken rhythm during those storm-locked days. Clara would wake first, starting breakfast while Jack tended the animals, a treacherous task in the deep snow. The boys helped where they could, Harold taking on more responsibility while Sam shadowed Clara in the kitchen. "Why does Pa call you Darlin?" Sam asked innocently one morning while helping her knead bread dough. Clara's hand stilled. "He doesn't. That was a slip of the tongue." "Ma used to call him Darlin sometimes," Sam continued, oblivious to her discomfort. "When she thought we weren't listening, she'd say, 'Darlin, you work too hard,' or 'Darlin, come to bed.'" "Sam," Harold warned from across the room where he was mending harness. "Don't!" But Sam persisted with the determination of a 9-year-old. "Do you think Pa misses being called Darlin?" Clara resumed kneading, choosing her words carefully. "I think everyone misses kindnesses they once knew." "Maybe that's why he said it to you," Sam decided, because he remembered being kind. From the corner of her eye, Clara saw Harold's hands pause in their work. The boy understood more than his younger brother about the weight of such words, the danger in them. The storm raged for 4 days, trapping them in a world reduced to the size of the house. Jack grew restless, pacing like a caged animal when he couldn't work outside. Clara found herself creating tasks to occupy him, accounts that needed reviewing, harness that required mending, even teaching him her neater penmanship. "Never had much schooling," he admitted one afternoon, laboring over letters while she guided his hand. "Sarah tried to teach me better writing, but I was too proud to pay attention." "Pride's a luxury most of us can't afford," Clara said quietly. He looked at her sharply. "Speaking from experience." She met his gaze steadily. "Aren't we all?" On the third night, the wind shifted, driving snow against the windows with renewed fury. Sam woke crying from a nightmare, and Clara went to him instinctively. She found Jack already there. The boy curled against his father's chest. "Ma was in the snow," Sam sobbed. "She was calling, but I couldn't find her." "Shh," Jack soothed, rocking slightly. "Ma's not in the snow. She's somewhere warm now." Clara retreated silently, but Jack called her back. "Stay," he said simply. Sometimes it helps to have more people close." So she sat on Sam's other side, humming softly while Jack held his son. Harold appeared in the doorway, trying to look unaffected, but when Clara held out an arm, he came too, settling against her side with careful nonchalance. They stayed that way until Sam's breathing evened out, a makeshift family huddled against the storm and darker things. When the boys finally slept, Jack carried Sam to bed while Clara tucked Harold in, smoothing his hair back from his forehead in a gesture that surprised them both. "Thank you," Harold whispered. "For what?" "For being here, for not—" He struggled for words. "For not trying to be her." Clara's throat tightened. "I wouldn't know how to be anyone but myself." "Good," the boy said fiercely. "That's good." Downstairs, Jack had returned to his chair by the fire. Clara settled onto her cot, but sleep eluded them both. "They're getting attached," Jack said into the silence. "Children need attachments," Clara replied carefully. "What happens when you leave?" The question hung between them. Clara had no answer. She'd taken this position with every intention of maintaining distance, of being nothing more than hired help. But distance was hard to maintain when you lived in someone's pocket, when children looked to you for comfort, when a man called you Darlin in an unguarded moment and looked as surprised as you felt. "I have no plans to leave," she said finally. "Plans change," Jack said, and she heard the voice of experience in his words. The storm broke on the fourth morning, weak sunlight revealing a world transformed by snow. Drifts reached the windows in places, and the path to the barn had disappeared entirely, but the roof had held Jack's emergency repairs proving sound. "I'll start fixing your room today," Jack announced over breakfast. "Weather's clear enough." Clara nodded, though part of her had grown comfortable with the arrangement. The storage room would be cold and lonely after the warmth of the main room, but propriety demanded it, and she'd already pushed those boundaries far enough. Jack and Harold worked through the day, hammering and sawing while Clara and Sam kept them supplied with hot coffee and food. By evening, they'd managed a decent repair, though Jack frowned at the results. "It'll hold," he said. "But that room was always cold. Should put in a small stove come spring." "It's fine," Clara assured him, gathering her few belongings. Everything smelled of snow and pine from the repairs. That night, she lay in her narrow bed under the eaves, listening to the house settle around her. The room was indeed cold, despite the extra quilts Jack had insisted she take. She pulled them higher, shivering, and thought about the warm spot by the fire, about Sam's nightmare and Harold's quiet thanks, about Jack calling her Darlin in a voice rough with disuse. Just sleeping arrangements, they'd said, nothing more. But Clara had learned that nothing more could be its own kind of something, that proximity could create intimacies no one intended. She'd learned it before, to her cost. The difference was that before, those intimacies had come with promises of love, of forever, of safety that proved false. Here, there were no promises, just the daily reality of shared work and space, of children who needed tending and a man who spoke little but noticed much. She must have dozed, because she woke to footsteps on the stairs. Jack appeared in her doorway, carrying an armload of wood. "Thought you might need this," he said, kneeling to build a fire in the small grate she hadn't even noticed. Should have done it earlier. "You don't need to—" "Yes," he said firmly. "I do." He worked in silence, coaxing flames from kindling with practiced ease. When the fire caught, he sat back on his heels. Sarah used to say I was better at actions than words. Suppose she was right. Actions speak true, Clara offered. He looked at her then, firelight playing across his weathered features. "That they do." He stood, brushing off his knees. "You need anything else?" "No, this is kind. Thank you." He paused at the door. "Clara." "Yes. What I said the other night calling you? What I called you, I apologize. It wasn't appropriate." She considered her words carefully. "We all say things in the dark we might not in the light. No harm done." He nodded slowly. "Still, won't happen again." After he left, Clara lay watching the fire he'd built, wondering why his assurance that it wouldn't happen again left her feeling oddly bereft. She'd come here seeking silence and solitude, a place to hide while her heart mended from breaks that might never fully heal. Instead, she'd found a different kind of breaking the slow dissolution of walls she'd built for protection, the dangerous warming of a heart she'd thought frozen solid. "Just sleep," she whispered to herself, echoing her words from that first night by the fire. But sleep, like everything else at the Callahan Ranch, had become complicated with meanings she hadn't intended and feelings she couldn't quite name. Life at the Callahan Ranch found its rhythm as December deepened. Clara rose before dawn each day, her breath misting in the cold air of her attic room despite the small fire Jack maintained each evening. She'd grown accustomed to the house's sounds, the settling of old wood, the whisper of wind through the repaired roof, the steady tread of Jack's boots as he began his day. The work had expanded beyond mere cooking and cleaning. She helped Harold with his letters in the evening, patient with his frustration when words wouldn't come right. Sam had appointed himself her assistant, following her through chores with endless questions about everything from why bread rose to where snow came from. Even Jack had begun including her in ranch decisions, asking her opinion on supply orders and discussing plans for spring planting. "You've got a head for numbers," he said one evening as she corrected his calculations on feed costs. "Where'd you learn?" "My mother kept books for my father's practice," Clara said, then immediately regretted the admission. Each piece of her past she revealed felt like a door cracking open. But Jack only nodded, filing the information away with the other fragments she'd let slip. He never pressed, never asked the questions she saw in his eyes sometimes, perhaps because he had his own doors better left closed. It was Sam who brought change, as children often do, with an innocent observation over breakfast. "Miss Clara's getting thin," he announced, studying her critically. "Thinner than when she came." Clara's hand paused halfway to the coffee pot. She hadn't realized it showed, though her dresses did hang looser these days. Too many meals spent serving others, nibbling just enough to keep going. "Sam," Harold hissed. "That's rude." "But it's true," Sam insisted. "Pa, don't you think—" "The boy's right," Jack interrupted, his gaze steady on Clara. "You barely eat. Food's not so scarce, we need you wasting away." "I eat plenty," Clara said quietly, but Jack's frown deepened. "No," he said firmly. "You don't. You serve everyone else. Pick at scraps while you work. Act like you're not entitled to a proper meal at the table." He pushed back his chair. "New rule. Nobody eats until you're sitting down with a full plate." "That's not necessary." "It is," Jack said with finality. "This family eats together. All of us." The word family hung in the air like a challenge. Clara saw Harold tense, Sam brighten, and something flicker across Jack's face that might have been surprise at his own words, but he didn't take them back. From that morning on, meal times shifted. Clara found herself subjected to the full attention of 3 males determined to see her eat. Sam would heap her plate when she wasn't looking. Harold passed dishes with pointed looks. Jack simply waited, refusing to lift his own fork until she did. "This is ridiculous," she said one evening when Sam had added a 3rd biscuit to her plate. "Maybe," Jack agreed mildly. "But you've put color back in your cheeks, so we'll keep being ridiculous." Clara felt that color deepen under his scrutiny and focused on her food to hide it. She wasn't used to being seen, truly seen. Her husband, former husband, she reminded herself had looked through her more often than at her, except when anger sharpened his focus. Here, she felt observed in ways that weren't unkind but were somehow more unsettling. The boys thrived under her care, though she tried not to take credit for it. Harold's sharp edges softened slightly, his protective anger giving way to occasional moments of boyishness. He'd started whistling while he worked, a tuneless but cheerful sound that made Jack stop and stare the first time he heard it. "Haven't heard that in a while," Jack said quietly to Clara later. "Boys need to be boys," she replied, "even when they're trying to be men." "You're good for them," he said, "for all of us." Clara turned away, uncomfortable with the gratitude in his voice. She was just doing a job, she told herself. The fact that it felt like more, that these 3 had worked their way past her defenses without trying, was a complication she couldn't afford. But complications, like feelings, didn't ask permission. It started small. Jack began lingering after dinner, helping clear plates despite her protests. Their hands would brush as they worked, accidental touches that sent warmth up her arms. He'd stand close as she showed him how to properly fold dough for biscuits, the heat of him at her back making her voice catch. "Like this?" he'd ask, his large hands surprisingly gentle with the delicate work. "Yes," she'd manage. "Just like that." The boys noticed. Of course, children always did. Sam would grin when he caught them standing close, and Harold would watch with eyes that missed nothing, but neither commented, perhaps sensing the fragility of whatever was building. One evening, a knock at the door interrupted their routine. Jack answered to find Mrs. Hollis and 2 other women from town, arms laden with covered dishes and expressions of false concern. "We've come to check on the poor boys." "Mrs." Hollis announced, pushing past Jack without invitation. Her gaze found Clara immediately, taking in her simple dress and flour-dusted apron with obvious disapproval. "And to see what arrangements have been made for their care." "The arrangements are none of your business, Martha," Jack said coldly. "Now, Jack," one of the other women said placatingly, "we're only concerned. A house without a woman's proper influence." "Has one," Jack interrupted. "Miss Whitley has been caring for this household better than—" He stopped, jaw clenched. "Better than Sarah, Mrs." Hollis suggested sweetly. "My, how quickly we forget." Clara saw Jack's hands fist at his sides and moved smoothly between them. "Ladies, how kind of you to visit. Would you care for coffee? I've just made fresh biscuits." The women exchanged glances, clearly torn between their mission and curiosity about Clara's housekeeping. Curiosity won. They settled around the table like crows, sharp-eyed and hungry for gossip. Clara served them with quiet efficiency, aware of their scrutiny. The coffee was hot and strong, the biscuits light as air. She'd learned long ago that competence was its own defense. "These are quite good," one woman admitted grudgingly. "Thank you," Clara said simply. "The boys seem to enjoy them." "Speaking of the boys, Mrs. Hollis began. "Surely it's not appropriate for them to be exposed to uncertain influences." "Nothing uncertain about Miss Clara." Sam piped up from the doorway. "She fixed my torn shirt and taught me letters and makes the best apple pie in Wyoming." "That's enough, Sam," Jack said, but his tone was gentle. Harold appeared beside his brother, taller and more serious. "Miss Whitley has been nothing but proper and kind," he said with dignity beyond his years. "More than I can say for some folks who claim Christian charity but practice gossip." "Mrs. Hollis gasped. "Well, I never—" "No," Jack said quietly. "You never offered help after Sarah died, never sent food or kind words, never did anything but whisper and judge." He moved to the door, opening it pointedly. "Evening, ladies." The women left in a flutter of indignation, promising consequences and proper authorities. Jack closed the door with controlled force. "Busybodies," he muttered. "They mean well," Clara said carefully. "No," Jack said. "They don't. They're bored and mean-spirited and looking for scandal where there is none." He paused, studying her. "Does it bother you, what they say?" Clara considered. "I've been talked about before. Survived it then. Will survive it now." Something in her tone made him look sharper. "Clara, I should check on the bread," she said quickly, escaping to the kitchen. But there was no escape from the truth the women's visit had illuminated. The town saw her as a scandal, a threat to propriety. More dangerously, she was beginning to see herself as belonging here, with this grieving man and his motherless boys. She'd let herself slip into their life like it was a warm bath after a long cold, and now she had risked drowning in the comfort of it. That night, she heard Jack's footsteps pause outside her door. He stood there long moments before continuing to his own room, and Clara lay awake wondering what he'd wanted to say. Or perhaps, like her, he'd simply wanted the reassurance of proximity, the knowledge that someone else was awake in the darkness. The next morning brought a change. Jack was quieter than usual, moving through breakfast with distracted efficiency. "Going to town," he announced. "Need supplies before the next storm." "I'll come," Clara offered, reaching for her shawl. "No." The word came sharp, and he softened it. "No need. Won't be long." He was gone before she could respond, leaving Clara with an uneasy feeling. The boys seemed to sense it too, hovering closer than usual as she worked. Jack returned near dusk, his expression grim. He carried not just supplies, but an official-looking letter that he set on the table with careful control. "What is it?" Harold asked. "Nothing that can't wait until after dinner," Jack said, but his eyes found Clara's with something like apology. They ate in unusual silence, even Sam subdued. When the dishes were cleared and the boys sent to do homework, Jack finally spoke. "Had a visit from Judge Cooper in town. Seems some concerned citizens have questioned whether I'm providing a proper home for the boys." Clara's hands stilled on the dishcloth. "Because of me." "Because of narrow minds and cruel tongues," Jack corrected harshly. "But yes, my hiring a young woman, unmarried, to live here." He scrubbed a hand over his face. "They're suggesting the boys would be better off with proper Christian families. Separately, of course." "No," Sam had crept back, eyes wide with fear. "We won't go tell them. Pa." Jack gathered his youngest son close. "Nobody's taking you anywhere. I'll see to that." "What do they want?" Clara asked quietly, though she suspected she knew. Jack's jaw worked. "For you to leave, or—" He stopped. Or for us to marry," he said bluntly. "Make it respectable. They said then there'd be no question of impropriety." The word hung between them like a blade. Marriage. Clara's stomach clenched with memory promises made and broken, vows that had become chains. She'd sworn never again, never to give someone that power over her. "I'll leave," she said. "Tonight. They can't object if—" "No," Jack's voice was firm. "I won't have you driven out by gossips and hypocrites." He paused, choosing words carefully. "But I won't have you forced into anything either. We'll find another way." "What other way?" Harold asked from the doorway. Sam at his side. Both boys looked stricken. Jack looked at his sons, then at Clara, something desperate in his eyes. "I don't know, but nobody's leaving and nobody's forcing anything. This is our home, our family." He stopped, hearing his own words. Our family, as if she belonged, as if she was more than hired help, as if the growing warmth between them was something nameable, claimable. Clara turned away, unable to bear the hope in the boys' faces or the question in Jack's eyes. She'd come here to hide, to work, to be nothing more than hands in a kitchen. Instead, she'd found a place that felt like home and people who looked at her like she mattered. "We'll think of something," she said finally. "We have time." But time, like winter, had a way of running out when you needed it most. And in her heart, Clara knew that some choices couldn't be postponed forever. The question was whether she could trust again, whether what she'd found here was real enough to risk the breaking that came with believing in anything at all. The letter from Judge Cooper cast a shadow over the household that no amount of lamp oil could brighten. For 3 days, they moved through their routines with forced normalcy, but Clara caught Jack staring at the official document when he thought no one was watching, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. "Maybe I should go to town," Clara suggested on the 4th morning. "Face them directly. Show them I'm not what they think." "And what do they think?" Jack asked, though they both knew the answer. "That I'm a woman of loose morals, here to corrupt your household." She said it matter-of-factly, having heard worse about herself. Jack's coffee cup hit the table harder than necessary. Anyone who spent 5 minutes in this house would know better. "But they haven't spent 5 minutes here," Clara pointed out. "They've only seen what they want to see." It was Harold who surprised them with a solution, or at least a delay. "What if we invited them, the whole town, for Christmas dinner?" Jack looked at his eldest son as if he'd suggested inviting wolves. "Why would we do that?" "Because," Harold said with careful logic, "they can't gossip about what they've seen with their own eyes. Let them come. Let them see Miss Clara isn't what they say. Let them see we're just a regular family." "We're not," Jack began, then stopped. "Aren't we?" Sam asked innocently. "We eat together and work together and take care of each other. That's what families do." Clara felt her throat tighten at the boy's simple definition. If only it were that easy. "It's not a bad idea," she said slowly. "Transparency often diffuses suspicion." Jack studied her. "You'd be willing to face all of them." "I've faced worse," she said quietly, then busied herself with clearing plates before he could ask what she meant. The invitation went out that week. Jack riding to town with gritted teeth to deliver personal invitations to the judge, Mrs. Hollis, and other prominent families. The responses ranged from suspicious acceptance to outright curiosity. Even those who disapproved wouldn't miss the chance to see inside Jack Callahan's self-imposed fortress. Preparations consumed the following days. Clara threw herself into the work with desperate energy, planning menus, taking inventory, calculating what they'd need. The boys helped enthusiastically, Sam chattering about decorations while Harold chopped wood and hauled water without being asked. Ma used to put pine boughs on the mantel, Sam mentioned one evening, and red ribbons if we had them. Clara looked to Jack, unsure whether acknowledging Sarah's traditions would be welcome or painful. "Then we'll have pine boughs," Jack said firmly, "and ribbons, red ones." They spent an afternoon gathering greenery, the 4 of them trudging through snow with saw and rope. Jack cut the boughs while the boys selected the best ones, and Clara tied them into arrangements. For a few hours, they almost forgot the reason for their preparations, lost in the simple pleasure of working together. "You're smiling," Jack observed, catching Clara as she laughed at something Sam said. "Am I?" She touched her face self-consciously. "I suppose I am." "It suits you," he said simply, then turned back to his work before she could respond. That evening, as Clara arranged pine boughs on the mantel, she found herself humming something she hadn't done in years. The house smelled of resin and the ginger snaps she'd baked with Sam's help. Harold was teaching his brother to make paper stars. Their heads bent together at the table. Jack sat mending harness, but she caught him watching them more than his work. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "For what?" "For this, for—" He gestured at the domestic scene, "for making it feel like Christmas again." "The boys deserve it," Clara said, adjusting a ribbon. "Not just for the boys," Jack said quietly. Their eyes met across the warm room, and Clara felt that dangerous flutter in her chest, hope trying to take wing despite everything she knew about its fragility. The next morning brought an unexpected trial. Clara was feeding chickens when she heard horses approaching. She turned to find 3 riders, and her blood turned to ice. The man in front, swaying slightly in his saddle, was devastatingly familiar. Well, Daniel Morrison slurred. "If it isn't my wayward wife." Clara's hands tightened on the feed bucket. "I'm not your wife, not anymore." "Now, Clara girl, that's no way to greet your husband." He dismounted unsteadily. His companions, rough men she didn't recognize, following suit. "Been looking for you for months. That paper you had drawn up don't mean nothing without my say-so." "The divorce was legal," Clara said, backing toward the house. "Judge Sanders signed it himself." "Judge Sanders is dead," Daniel said with satisfaction. "And dead men's signatures don't hold much weight. You're still mine, Clara. Always have been." "No." The word came out stronger than she felt. "I'm not going back." Daniel's face darkened, an expression she knew too well. "You'll do as you're told, like a proper wife. Get your things." The lady said no. Jack stood in the barn doorway, rifle held casually but ready. Harold appeared beside him, his own hunting rifle in hand. Daniel laughed. "So it's true what they're saying in town. You've taken up with another man already. Always were eager to spread your—" "Finish that sentence and you'll regret it," Jack said coldly. "You're trespassing. Leave." "Not without my wife." "She's not your wife," Jack said with certainty that surprised Clara. "She's under my protection and the protection of this household. You'll leave now, or I'll help you leave. Your choice." Daniel's hand moved toward his gun, but froze as Harold cocked his rifle with smooth efficiency. "Boy knows how to use that," Jack observed mildly. "Taught him myself. Good shot, too." The standoff stretched taut until one of Daniel's companions spoke up. "Come on, Morrison. Ain't worth getting shot over a woman." "This isn't over," Daniel snarled at Clara. "You can't hide forever." "She's not hiding," Jack said. "She's living. There's a difference." After they left, Clara found herself shaking. Jack guided her inside, his hand steady on her elbow. "Sit," he ordered gently, pouring coffee with hands that weren't quite steady either. "Harold, take Sam to check the fence lines." "But Pa—" "Now, son." When they were alone, Jack sat across from her. "Was that your husband?" "Was," Clara confirmed. "The divorce was legal. Whatever he claims, I have papers." "I believe you," Jack said simply, "but he'll be back." "I know." Clara stared into her coffee. "I should leave. This is my trouble, not yours." "No." The word was flat, final. "You're not running anymore." "You don't understand." "Don't I?" Jack's voice was harsh. "You think you're the only one who's lived with someone whose love turned to something else, Sarah." He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "Sarah was sick long before she died. In her mind, after Sam was born. She'd have dark spells, said things, did things. The woman I married disappeared bit by bit, replaced by someone I didn't recognize." Clara looked up, seeing fresh pain in his eyes. "I know what it is to love someone who hurts you," he continued quietly. "To stay because of vows, because of hope, because leaving feels like failure. I know what it costs to pretend everything's fine when you're breaking inside." "Jack, so don't tell me I don't understand." he finished. "And don't think I'll let you face this alone." Clara felt tears threaten the first in so long she'd forgotten the burn of them. Why? Why would you risk your boys, your reputation, for someone you barely know? Jack leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Because you sang to Sam when he was sick. Because you made Harold smile again. Because you brought life back to this house." He paused. "Because I'm selfish enough to want you to stay." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Clara saw her own longing reflected in his eyes, the desperate wish to trust again warred with the fear of betrayal. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of him, of this, of believing in anything good." "So am I," Jack said. "But maybe being scared together is better than being scared alone." A sound from the kitchen made them both turn. Sam stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "Is that man going to take Miss Clara away?" he asked in a small voice. Jack held out an arm, and Sam ran to him. "No, son, nobody's taking Miss Clara unless she wants to go." "You don't want to go, do you?" Sam asked Clara anxiously. Clara looked at this child who'd given her his trust so easily, at Jack who offered protection without price, at this house that had become more home than anywhere she'd lived. "No," she said softly. "I don't want to go." "Good," Sam said firmly, "because we need you for Christmas dinner, and forever too." Out of the mouths of babes, Clara thought. Forever. Such a dangerous word. One she'd sworn never to believe in again. But looking at these two faces, one small and hopeful, one weathered but kind, she thought maybe, just maybe, some forevers might be worth the risk. "One day at a time," Jack said, reading her thoughts. "That's all any of us can do." Clara nodded. One day at a time, starting with facing the town in 3 days, proving she belonged here, and somehow keeping her past from destroying this fragile present she'd built. "We should practice my pie crust," she said, voice steadier. "If we're to impress the town, everything must be perfect." "You could serve them hardtack and water and still be perfect," Jack said, then colored slightly at his own words. Sam giggled. "Pa thinks you're perfect, Miss Clara." "Hush, you," Jack said, but he was almost smiling. Clara felt warmth bloom in her chest, dangerous, precious warmth. "Well then," she said, "perfect pie crust it is." As she stood to begin work, Jack caught her hand briefly. "We'll handle whatever comes," he said quietly. Together. Together. Another dangerous word. But as Clara squeezed his hand in return before pulling away, she thought perhaps some dangers were worth embracing, even if it meant believing. One more time. That broken things could be mended, and that somewhere between the darkness of what was and the uncertainty of what might be, there was space for something like hope. The night before Christmas Eve brought the kind of cold that made the house crack and groan like a living thing. Clara couldn't sleep, her mind churning with preparations for tomorrow's dinner and the lingering echo of Daniel's threats. She'd finally given up, wrapping herself in a shawl to go downstairs for tea. She found Jack already there, sitting by the dying fire with something in his hands. He looked up at her footsteps, unsurprised. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "Too much to think about," Clara admitted, moving to heat water on the stove. "Here," Jack said, rising. "Sit by the fire. I'll make the tea." It was such a simple reversal, him serving her instead of the other way around, but it made her throat tight. She settled into the chair he'd vacated, still warm from his presence, and noticed what he'd been holding, a small wooden frame with a photograph. "Sarah," she said, not a question. Jack glanced over from the stove. "Our wedding day. She was 18. I was 22. Thought we had all the time in the world." Clara studied the young woman in the photograph, pretty, with a bright smile and eyes that held no shadow of what was to come. "She was lovely." "She was," Jack agreed, bringing 2 cups of tea. He handed her one, then sat in the other chair. Took me a long time to be able to look at that picture without feeling like I'd failed her somehow. You didn't fail her, Clara said softly. No, I couldn't fix what was broken in her mind. Couldn't stop the sadness that took her bit by bit. Couldn't even get her to eat. Near the end, he stared into his cup. Sound familiar? Clara understood the connection he was making her own thinness when she'd arrived. The way she'd had to be coaxed to take proper meals. That's different. Is it? Jack looked at her directly. You were fading too when you came here. Not the same way, but fading all the same. And now you hum when you work. You laugh with the boys. You've put on weight, don't look offended. It's a good thing. You're coming back to life. Clara considered this. She had been fading in Kansas City, going through motions without feeling, existing rather than living. Maybe we're all coming back to life. Maybe we are, Jack agreed. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I need to tell you something. Before tomorrow. Before you face all those people thinking you know what you're walking into. Clara's stomach clenched. What? Sarah's death. It wasn't the fever that took her. Not exactly. He set down his cup, hands clasping and unclasping. She took laudanum for the pain, for the darkness in her mind. Doctor prescribed it. But that last night, she took too much, maybe on purpose, maybe not. I found her in the morning, bottle empty beside her. Clara reached out instinctively, covering his restless hands with one of hers. Jack! People know. Not everyone, but enough. They whisper about it. Wonder if I drove her to it, if the boys are tainted somehow by her final choice. His laugh was bitter. And now I've brought another troubled woman into my home. You can imagine what they're saying. I'm not Sarah, Clara said firmly. No, Jack agreed, turning his hands to grasp hers. You're not. You're fighting to live, not looking for ways to leave. But they'll compare you. They'll watch for signs of weakness, reasons to prove I'm unfit to raise my boys. Clara understood now why he'd been so adamant about facing the town. About the Christmas dinner. It wasn't just about her reputation, it was about proving his family deserved to stay together. Then we'll show them, she said. We'll show them a household that works, children who are loved, a home that's healing. You make it sound simple. Simple doesn't mean easy. Clara said, I should go start the bread. Want it fresh for tomorrow? At 3 a.m. Baking's good for thinking, and not thinking. Jack squeezed her hands before letting go. I'll help. They worked side by side in comfortable silence, mixing dough and tending the fire. Jack proved surprisingly adept at kneading, his strong hands gentle with the delicate work. Where'd you learn that? Clara asked. My mother. 7 boys in our family. Everyone had to help in the kitchen. He smiled at the memory. She'd have liked you. Would have said you had backbone. I'm not sure how much backbone I have left. Clara admitted. Enough, Jack said simply. More than enough. As dawn broke, they had 6 loaves rising and the kitchen warm with accomplishment. The boys found them there, flour-dusted and tired, but oddly content. Did you stay up all night? Harold asked, looking between them with interest. Just an early start, Clara said. Big day ahead. Sam climbed into Jack's lap. Still sleepy. Are lots of people really coming? Yes, Jack said, but we're ready for them. The day flew by in a whirlwind of preparation. Clara orchestrated the chaos with calm efficiency, while Jack and the boys handled firewood, cleared snow from the paths, and arranged tables made from sawhorses and planks. By afternoon, the house smelled of roasting meat, fresh bread, and the pies Clara had baked with Sam's eager assistance. You need to change, Jack told her as the sun began to sink. Guests will be here soon. Clara looked down at her work dress, spotted and flour-dusted. She'd been so focused on the meal she'd forgotten about herself. Go, Jack urged. We can manage the last bits. Upstairs, Clara opened her trunk and pulled out her one good dress, a deep blue wool she'd made herself in better days. It still fit, though differently now, no longer hanging loose on her frame. She brushed her hair until it shone, pinning it up more carefully than usual. Looking in the small mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The gaunt, haunted woman who'd arrived in November had been replaced by someone with color in her cheeks and steadiness in her eyes. When she descended, Jack was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He'd changed too, into a clean white shirt and dark vest, his hair damp from washing. For a moment, they just looked at each other. "You clean up well, Mr. Callahan," Clara said softly. "As do you, Miss Whitley." He offered his arm. "Shall we face the lions together?" The first guests arrived precisely at 5 Judge Cooper and his wife, a thin woman who looked permanently disapproving. Others followed quickly: the Hollises, the Brennans, Murdoch from the general store, and a dozen other families. Soon the house was full of voices and watchful eyes. Clara moved through it all with practiced grace, serving drinks, directing children, making sure everyone was comfortable. She felt the scrutiny like a physical weight but refused to bend under it. "The house looks wonderful," one woman admitted grudgingly. "So festive." "The boys helped with everything," Clara said, deflecting credit. "And this bread is delicious," another added. "So light." "Mr. Callahan helped make it," Clara said, catching Jack's eye across the room. "He has excellent hands for kneading." Several women tittered at that, and Jack's ears reddened, but he smiled. The meal itself was a triumph. The roast was perfectly done, the vegetables seasoned just right, the pies proclaimed the best in the county. Even Mrs. Hollis couldn't find fault, though she clearly tried. "You've done wonders with the household," Judge Cooper told Clara as she refilled his coffee. "The boys seem to be thriving." "They're good boys," Clara said simply. "They just needed steady routine and regular meals." "And affection," the judge's wife added unexpectedly. "Children always know when they're cared for." As the evening wore on, Clara felt the atmosphere shifting. Suspicion gave way to curiosity, then to something approaching acceptance. She caught fragments of conversation. "Not what I expected. The boys do seem happy. House hasn't looked this good in years. Maybe we judged too harshly." It was Sam who sealed the evening's success. As guests prepared to leave, he stood on a chair and announced, "I want to say something." "Sam," Harold hissed. "Sit down." "No, I got important words." Sam insisted. "Before Miss Clara came, our house was real quiet. Pa was sad and Harold was mad and I was scared all the time. But now we laugh and sing and eat together and it feels like home again." He looked directly at Judge Cooper. "So please don't make her leave. We need her, and she needs us too, even if she don't say so." In the silence that followed, Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Jack moved to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she felt his warmth. "Well," Judge Cooper cleared his throat. "I think young Sam has said it all. Miss Whitley, it's clear you've brought something valuable to this household. I see no reason for official concern." "Thank you," Jack said quietly, and Clara heard the relief in his voice. As the guests departed, many stopped to thank Clara personally, some even inviting her to call on them in town. Mrs. Hollis was among the last to leave, and she paused at the door. "I misjudged you," she said stiffly. "I apologize." "No apology necessary," Clara said. "You were concerned for the boys. I understand that." Mrs. Hollis studied her for a moment. "Sarah was my cousin, you know, seeing another woman in her place. It was difficult." "I'm not trying to replace her," Clara said gently. "No one could." "No," Mrs. Hollis agreed. "But perhaps that's not what this family needs." She glanced at Jack, who was helping Harold stack chairs. "Perhaps they need something new." After everyone left, The four of them stood in the suddenly quiet house. It looked like a celebration had exploded, dishes everywhere, furniture askew, but with pine boughs still fragrant on the mantel and candles flickering warmly. "We did it," Harold said wonderingly. "Miss Clara did it," Sam corrected. "She made everything perfect." "We all did it," Clara said, "together." "Together," Jack repeated, and his hand found hers. Just for a moment. "Thank you for all of it." That night, Clara helped tuck the boys in, both of them exhausted from the day's excitement. Sam hugged her tight. "You're staying now, right forever." "I'm staying," Clara confirmed, smoothing his hair. "Good, 'cause you're family now. The judge said so." Downstairs, she found Jack adding wood to the fire. Without speaking, she began collecting dishes to wash. He joined her at the sink, drying as she washed, working in the comfortable rhythm they'd developed. "The boys are right," he said eventually. "You are family, if you want to be." Clara's hand stilled in the soapy water. "Jack!" "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he said quickly. "Just wanting you to know. You have a place here. For as long as you want it." Clara resumed washing, her heart too full for words. Family, home, belonging. Things she'd thought lost forever, offered freely with no conditions. "I want it," she whispered. They finished the dishes in silence, but it was a different silence than when she'd first arrived. Not empty, but full. Not cold, but warm with possibility. And when Jack bid her good night at the stairs, his fingers brushed hers again. A promise of patience and perhaps, someday, something more. The new year brought a deceptive peace to the Callahan Ranch. January's bitter cold kept most travelers away, and the household settled into comfortable routines. Clara had almost allowed herself to believe Daniel's threats were empty, that he'd given up and moved on. She should have known better. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. Clara was in the barn, gathering eggs, humming softly to herself, a habit she'd developed in the past weeks. The hens clucked contentedly around her feet, and winter sunlight slanted through the gaps in the boards, creating patterns on the hay-strewn floor. She didn't hear him approach. The first warning was a shadow falling across the doorway. Then Daniel's voice, steadier than before, but no less menacing. "Hello, Clara girl." The basket slipped from her hands, eggs smashing on the ground. She backed away instinctively, her heart hammering. "Now that's wasteful," Daniel said, stepping inside. He was alone this time, and sober somehow that made him more frightening. "Always were clumsy when you got nervous." "You need to leave," Clara managed. "Jack and the boys are in town," Daniel finished. "Saw them myself at the feed store. Figure we got at least an hour to talk." Clara's mind raced. The house was too far to run to, and he stood between her and the door. "What do you want?" "What's mine?" He said simply. "You, been patient. Clara, gave you time to play house with that rancher, but game's over now." "I'm not your property," Clara said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "I never was." Daniel's face darkened. "That where you're wrong, that paper you got means nothing. You took vows before God and man. For better or worse. Remember." "I remember the worse," Clara shot back. "I remember the bruises and the fear and losing our baby because—" She stopped, having said more than she intended. Daniel's expression shifted. "That weren't my fault," he said, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "You were always weak. Couldn't carry a child proper." "I was healthy before I married you," Clara said quietly. "Before you decided your fists spoke louder than words. You provoked me, always pushing, always wanting more than I could give." "I wanted kindness," Clara said. "Basic human kindness. That was too much." For a moment, she saw something almost like shame cross his features. Then his jaw hardened. "Don't matter now," You're coming with me. No. The simple word hung between them. In their years of marriage, she'd rarely defied him so directly. She'd learned early that submission meant fewer bruises, that agreeing meant peace, however temporary. What did you say? His voice was dangerously quiet. I said no. Clara lifted her chin. I have a life here, a good life. I cook and clean and care for 2 boys who need me. I'm valued here. Daniel, do you understand that valued for more than being someone's punching post? That rancher been filling your head with ideas. Daniel moved closer, and Clara forced herself not to retreat. You spreading your legs for him. That why you think you're so high and mighty now? Jack Callahan is a good man, Clara said evenly. He's never raised a hand to me, never raised his voice except to call the boys for supper. He says please and thank you and notices when I do something well. That's all. That's enough. You always did want too much, Daniel said. Always thought you were better than you were. College-educated father, reading all them books, made you think you were special. Not special, Clara said. Just human, deserving of basic dignity. Daniel grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. You're coming with me, now. Let go! Or what you'll scream nobody to hear you. She doesn't need to scream. The voice came from behind Daniel, not Jack's, but Harold's. The boy stood in the doorway, hunting rifle steady in his hands. This don't concern you, boy, Daniel said, but his grip on Clara loosened slightly. You're wrong, Harold said. His voice cracked slightly. He was only 12. After all, but the rifle didn't waver. Miss Clara's part of our family. That makes it my concern. Harold, Clara said softly. Put the gun down. You don't need... Yes, I do, Harold interrupted. Pa told me to protect the household when he's gone. That includes you. Daniel released Clara's arm, turning to face the boy. You wouldn't shoot a man. Try me, Harold said, and something in his steady gaze made Daniel step back. My ma died. Not letting anyone else get hurt in this family. I'm your family. Sam's voice piped up from behind Harold. The younger boy squeezed past his brother, clutching a pitchfork like a spear. And nobody hurts our Miss Clara. Clara's heart clenched at the sight of them 2 boys willing to stand against a grown man for her sake. Boys, please. We saw him from the road, Harold explained, never taking his eyes off Daniel. Pa went for the sheriff. Should be here soon. As if on cue, the sound of horses reached them. Multiple horses riding hard. Daniel's face went pale. This ain't over, he said to Clara. Yes, she said quietly. It is. Jack burst through the door, taking in the scene, his sons armed and ready. Clara backed against the wall. Daniel caught between them. His expression went from fear to fury in an instant. Get away from her, he said, voice deadly quiet. Sheriff Watson appeared behind him, along with 2 deputies. Daniel Morrison, you're under arrest for trespassing and threatening behavior. She's my wife, Daniel protested as the deputies grabbed his arms. I got rights. Not according to the divorce decree from Kansas City, the sheriff said. Which Mrs. Whitley was kind enough to file with our courthouse last month. He glanced at Clara. Smart thinking, ma'am. Clara sagged with relief. She'd sent the papers quietly, hoping she'd never need them, but Jack had suggested it as a precaution. I'll contest it, Daniel snarled as they dragged him out. I'll be back. No, Sheriff Watson said firmly. You won't. See, we got a telegram from Kansas City yesterday. Seems you're wanted there for theft and assault. You'll be their guest for quite a while. Daniel's protests faded as they hauled him away. In the sudden silence, Clara found herself shaking. Jack crossed to her in 2 strides, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Are you hurt? No, she managed. The boys, they were so brave. Too brave, Jack said, looking at his sons with a mixture of pride and fear. You could have been hurt. "We're family," Sam said simply. "Family protects each other." Jack's hands tightened on Clara's shoulders. "Yes," he said roughly. "We do." That evening, after statements were given and the sheriff assured them Daniel would be transported to Kansas within days, they gathered around the dinner table. Clara had made a simple meal, her hands still unsteady. The boys were unusually quiet, the day's events settling over them like dust. "I'm sorry," Clara said finally. "I brought danger to your home, to your children. I should never have—" "Stop," Jack said firmly. "You brought nothing but good to this house. That man's evil is his own doing, not yours." "But if I hadn't come here, then we'd still be eating burnt beans and wearing holy socks," Harold said with forced lightness. "And Pa would still be drinking coffee you could strip paint with." "And I wouldn't know how to read proper," Sam added. "Or how to make biscuits. Or smile," Jack said quietly. When Clara looked at him in surprise, he continued, "I'd forgotten how, before you came, how to smile without it hurting. How to look forward to coming in from the cold knowing someone would be there." He paused. "You didn't bring danger, Clara. You brought life." Clara felt tears threaten again. "I was so scared," she admitted. "When he showed up, I thought I'd have to go back to being small again, to disappearing inside myself just to survive." "You stood up to him," Harold said admiringly. "Told him no straight out." "Sometimes that's the bravest thing a person can do," Jack said. "Saying no, refusing to be less than you are." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Sam, irrepressible as always, piped up, "Does this mean you'll stay forever now since the bad man's gone?" Clara looked around the table at Harold, trying so hard to be grown up, but still just a boy who'd lost his mother. At Sam, whose joy was returning day by day. At Jack, who'd offered her shelter without conditions and protection without price. "If you'll have me," she said softly. "Forever and always," Sam declared. "Right, Pa." Jack's eyes met Clara's across the table. "Forever and always," he agreed. "If that's what you want." "I want," Clara said simply. "I want very much." Later, after the boys were in bed, Clara and Jack sat by the fire. The events of the day seemed almost dreamlike in the peaceful warmth of the room. "Thank you," Clara said, "for believing me about the divorce, for standing by me, for doing what any decent man would do." Jack interrupted. "Don't thank me for basic human behavior. Clara, you've had too little of it if you think it's remarkable." "It is remarkable," Clara insisted. "To me." Jack studied her in the firelight. "He won't hurt you again. I promise you that." "I know." And she did. For the first time in years, she felt truly safe. "Jack." What Sam said about forever." Jack turned to face her fully. "I meant it, but I'm not pushing. We can take as much time as you need, court as proper as you like. I want you to know my intentions are honorable." Clara felt a smile tug at her lips, her first real smile since Daniel's appearance. "Are you saying you want to court me, Jack Callahan?" "If you'll let me," he said seriously. "You deserve to be courted proper. Flowers and Sunday rides and all of it." "I don't need all of it," Clara said. "I just need—" "What?" Jack asked when she trailed off. "What do you need?" Clara considered. What did she need? Safety? Yes, but she had that now. Kindness, but that was already here in abundance. Love. The word still frightened her, but looking at Jack's weathered face, his steady eyes, his hands that had never hurt her, maybe love was possible again, different from before. Not the desperate, grasping thing her marriage had been, but something quieter, stronger. "Time," she said finally. "Just time. To remember who I am when I'm not afraid. To learn who we might be together." "Time I've got," Jack said. "All the time you need." They sat together as the fire burned low, not touching but close. Outside, winter wind rattled the windows, but inside was warmth and safety, and the promise of tomorrow without fear. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. More than enough. It was a beginning. The first real laugh came on a Thursday evening in late January, surprising everyone, including Clara herself. Sam had been recounting a story from school, something about Tommy Murdoch getting his head stuck in the fence rails during the recess, with elaborate gestures and sound effects. The absurdity of it, combined with Sam's theatrical delivery, struck Clara as impossibly funny. The laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep, rich and genuine, filling the kitchen with a sound that hadn't been heard in the Callahan house for years. Everyone froze. Sam's mouth hung open mid-word. Harold's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Jack stared as if he'd witnessed a miracle. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, embarrassed by the outburst. "I'm sorry, Do it again," Sam demanded. "That was beautiful." "You can't order someone to laugh," Harold told his brother, but he was smiling too. Though it was nice to hear. Jack said nothing, but his eyes held something warm and wondering as he watched her. After that, laughter came easier. Small chuckles at first, then genuine amusement at the boys' antics or Jack's dry observations. Each laugh seemed to chip away at the shell she'd built around herself, letting light into places that had been dark too long. "You're different," Harold observed one evening as she taught him to darn socks. "Lighter, somehow." "Am I?" Clara asked, though she felt it too, a lifting of weight she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it wasn't part of her. "Like you're not waiting for something bad to happen anymore," the boy said with perception beyond his years. Clara considered this. "I suppose I'm not. That's thanks to all of you." "We didn't do anything special," Harold protested. "You did everything," Clara corrected softly. "You gave me a place to be myself again." True to his word, Jack began courting her properly. It started small wildflowers left on the kitchen table where she'd find them first thing in the morning. A new hair ribbon from town, presented gruffly with muttered explanations about the color matching her eyes. His best shirt, worn to dinner, hair slicked back like a young man calling on his sweetheart. "You don't need to do all this." Clara told him one evening after he'd insisted on pulling out her chair at dinner, something he'd never done before. "Yes, I do," Jack said firmly. "Should have been doing it all along. You deserve to be treated like a lady." "I'm the hired help," Clara reminded him, though the words had long since lost their meaning. "No," Jack said. "You're not. Haven't been for a long time." The boys watched these developments with undisguised interest and occasional helpful interference. "Pa's sweet on you," Sam informed Clara one morning as if sharing a great secret. "He told Mr. Murphy at the feed store that you make the best apple pie in Wyoming territory." "Did he now?" Clara tried to hide her smile. "And he bought new cologne." Sam continued. "The fancy kind from the city. Smells like a pine tree had a fight with a flower garden." "Sam," Harold warned, but he was grinning. Indeed, Jack had taken to wearing cologne sparingly, thankfully. He'd also started coming in earlier from evening chores, taking time to wash up and change before dinner. Sometimes Clara caught him checking his reflection in the window glass, smoothing his hair or straightening his collar. "You're peacocking," she told him one evening, amused. Jack flushed but didn't deny it. "Man wants to look presentable for a lady." "You've always looked presentable," Clara said, then felt heat rise in her own cheeks at the admission. Their first real outing came in early February. Jack announced at breakfast that he needed supplies from town and wondered if Clara might accompany him for help selecting fabric, he added unconvincingly, since Clara had been choosing household supplies for months. "It's a date," Sam exclaimed. "Can we come?" "No," Jack said firmly. "You two are spending the day with the Brennans. Already arranged it." Harold studied his father shrewdly. "So it is a date." "It's a supply run," Jack insisted, but his ears were red. Clara wore her good dress and took extra care with her hair. When she came downstairs, Jack was waiting in his Sunday suit, looking nervous as a schoolboy. He helped her into the wagon with careful hands, spreading a thick blanket over her lap. For warmth, he explained, though the day was surprisingly mild for February. The ride to town passed in comfortable conversation. Jack pointed out landmarks, the creek where he'd learned to fish, the stand of cottonwoods where he'd proposed to Sarah, the hill where they'd picnicked that first summer. Clara realized he was sharing his history, letting her into the geography of his life. In town, they did purchase supplies, but Jack also steered her toward the small restaurant attached to Murdoch's store. "Thought you might enjoy a meal you didn't have to cook," he said. "Jack Callahan." "Mrs.," Brennan exclaimed, spotting them from across the street. "And Miss Whitley having lunch together. How lovely." By evening, Clara knew the whole town would be talking. She found she didn't care. Let them see that she and Jack were… what? She wasn't sure what to call it yet, but it was something good, something with promise. Over beef stew and fresh bread, they talked about everything and nothing. Jack told her about his plans for expanding the ranch, maybe adding sheep to diversify. Clara shared her ideas for a larger garden come spring, preserving enough vegetables to last next winter. "You're planning ahead," Jack observed. "For next winter." "Should I not?" Clara asked, suddenly uncertain. "You should," Jack assured her quickly. "I want you planning ahead for as many winters as you like." After lunch, they walked through town, Jack's hand properly at her elbow. People noticed, of course. Some nodded approvingly. Others whispered behind their hands. Judge Cooper tipped his hat with a knowing smile. "Does the attention bother you?" Jack asked. "No," Clara said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I've been gossiped about before for shameful reasons. Being talked about for walking with a good man on a sunny afternoon. That's no hardship." "Good man," Jack repeated softly. "Not sure I've earned that." "You have," Clara said firmly. "Every day, in 100 small ways." On the ride home, Jack took a detour, guiding the horses up a small rise that overlooked the valley. The view was spectacular, rolling white fields, the mountains majestic in the distance, the ranch small but sturdy below them. "Wanted to show you this," Jack said. "Used to come here to think, after Sarah, haven't been back in 2 years." "Why now?" Clara asked softly. Jack turned to look at her. "Because now I've got something better than memories to think about. Got hopes again. Plans." He paused. "Dreams. Maybe." Clara's heart beat fast. "What kind of dreams?" "The kind that involve you," Jack said simply. "If you're willing." "Jack!" "I know it's soon," he continued. "No, you need time. I just want you to know where I stand, where my heart stands." Clara looked out at the view the life spread before them, the home waiting below. "My mother used to say that time doesn't heal wounds, it just teaches us to carry them better. But being here, with you and the boys, I'm not just carrying them better. They're actually healing." "Good," Jack said roughly. "That's good." "Yes," Clara agreed. "It is." The boys were waiting on the porch when they returned, bouncing with excitement. "How was your date?" Sam demanded. "It was a supply run," Jack said automatically. "A date supply run?" Harold corrected, grinning. "Mrs. Brennan told us you had lunch at the restaurant, together, alone." "Don't you two have chores?" Jack asked, but he was almost smiling. That evening felt different. The boys were giddy, sensing change in the air. Jack helped with dishes without being asked. Clara found herself humming as she worked, occasionally catching Jack watching her with soft eyes. "Play something, Pa," Sam requested after dinner. "Like you used to." Clara looked up in surprise. She'd never heard Jack play anything. "It's been too long," Jack protested. "Probably forgotten how Please, Harold added his voice to his brother's. For Miss Clara. Jack sighed but retrieved a violin case from the high shelf in the parlor. The instrument was beautiful polished wood that gleamed in the lamplight. Didn't know you played, Clara said. Haven't, not since, he trailed off. But they all knew. Not since Sarah died. Jack tuned the instrument carefully, then drew the bow across the strings. The sound that emerged was sweet and clear, filling the room with melody. He played a simple tune at first, fingers remembering their old patterns, then gaining confidence. He launched into something more complex, a waltz that made Clara's feet itch to dance. Ma used to dance when he played, Sam said wistfully. Right here in front of the fire. Jack's fingers faltered, but Clara stood, smoothing her skirts. Well then, she said, seems a shame to waste good music. She held out her hand to Sam. May I have this dance, good sir? Sam jumped up, delighted. Clara showed him the basic steps, guiding him through the movements as Jack found his rhythm again. When Sam had the hang of it, she turned to Harold. Your turn. Harold protested that he was too old for dancing, but Clara coaxed him into trying. He was surprisingly graceful once he stopped thinking so hard about it. Jack played on, watching his boys dance with Clara in the firelight. When the tune ended, both boys collapsed on the sofa, laughing and breathless. Your turn, Pa, Sam exclaimed. Dance with Miss Clara. I can't play and dance at the same time, Jack pointed out. Then just dance, Harold suggested. We know you remember how. Jack set down the violin carefully. He turned to Clara, suddenly formal. Miss Whitley, would you honor me with a dance? Clara's heart fluttered like she was 16 again. I would be delighted, Mr. Callahan. Jack hummed the waltz melody as they danced, his hand warm at her waist, hers resting lightly on his shoulder. They moved carefully at first, learning each other's rhythm. Then muscle memory took over, and they flowed together as if they'd been dancing for years. You're good at this, Clara said softly. Sarah loved to dance, Jack said. Made me practice until I could do it without stepping on her feet. She taught you well. Yes, Jack agreed. She did, but this is different. Different how? Jack spun her gently, then pulled her back. Dancing with her always felt like trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. Dancing with you feels like finding something I didn't know I was looking for. Clara's breath caught, around them. The boys watched with bright eyes, and the fire painted everything golden. In Jack's arms, Clara felt something she'd thought lost forever, safe and cherished and whole. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For helping me remember that life can be good, that men can be gentle, that laughter is allowed. Her voice caught. That I'm allowed to be happy. Jack's hand tightened on hers. You're more than allowed. Clara, you deserve every happiness this world can offer. Careful, Clara said, trying for lightness. I might start believing you. Good, Jack said seriously. Believe it. Believe me. As they swayed together in the firelight, their makeshift family complete around them, Clara thought that maybe, just maybe, she could. The church social was Sam's idea, though he'd clearly been coached by Mrs. Brennan during one of his visits to town. Everyone's going, he announced at breakfast in mid-February. Mrs. Brennan says there'll be dancing and cake and everything. Can we go, Pa, can we? Jack looked uncomfortable. He'd avoided most social gatherings since Sarah's death, preferring the isolation of the ranch to the sympathetic looks and whispered conversations of town events. I don't know. Son, got a lot of work here. It's on Saturday, Harold interrupted. And the Murphys already said they'd help with evening chores if we want to go. Jack glanced at Clara, who was carefully neutral as she served breakfast. What do you think? I think, Clara said slowly, that the boys would enjoy it, and it might be good for all of us to be part of the community. What she didn't say was that she'd overheard Mrs. Brennan mentioning how Jack never attended social events anymore, how the town worried about him and the boys becoming hermits, or that she herself was curious about these gatherings, having been excluded from such things during her marriage. "Please, Pa," Sam deployed his most winning smile. "I promise I'll do extra chores all week." "Me too," Harold added, though with less enthusiasm for the extra work. Jack sighed in defeat. "All right, we'll go, but we're not staying late." Sam whooped with joy, and even Harold smiled. Clara felt a flutter of nervousness. It would be her first real social event as, not quite family, but more than hired help. The ambiguity of her position suddenly seemed glaring, as if reading her thoughts. Jack said quietly, "You'll come with us, as our guest, not—" He gestured vaguely, "not working." "I don't know if that's appropriate," Clara began. "It's appropriate," Jack said firmly. "You're part of this household. The boys want you there. I want you there." The last was said quietly, but Sam heard it anyway. "Yes, Miss Clara has to come. She needs to have fun too." The week passed quickly, filled with preparations. Clara found herself fussing over what to wear before settling on her blue dress again. It was still her best. She helped the boys clean and mend their good clothes, pretending not to notice Jack trying on different shirts and asking Harold which looked better. Saturday arrived crisp and clear. They finished chores early, everyone taking extra care with their appearance. Jack had trimmed his hair and beard, and the cologne made another appearance more subtly applied this time. The boys were scrubbed until they shone. Hair slicked down, though Sam's was already trying to escape. "You look beautiful, Miss Clara," Sam said when she came downstairs. "Like a lady in a picture book," Harold added, then blushed at his own words. Jack said nothing, but his eyes spoke volumes as he helped her with her coat. The church hall was already crowded when they arrived, warm with bodies and laughter. Lanterns cast golden light over everything, and tables groaned under the weight of contributed dishes. A small group of musicians was setting up in one corner. Their entrance caused a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Conversations paused, heads turned. Clara lifted her chin and smiled pleasantly, refusing to be cowed by curiosity. "Jack Callahan?" Pastor Williams approached with genuine warmth. "How wonderful to see you. And Miss Whitley, lovely as always. Boys, my goodness, how you've grown." The greeting broke the ice, and soon they were absorbed into the crowd. Women who had been standoffish before now approached Clara with recipe questions and compliments on her dress. Men clapped Jack on the shoulder, expressing pleasure at seeing him out and about. "Told you it would be good to come," Clara murmured to Jack during a quiet moment. "You were right," he admitted. "Though I'm not sure how I feel about Tom Bradley asking if you're being courted proper." Clara hid a smile. "What did you tell him?" "That you were being courted very proper and he should mind his own business." Before Clara could respond, the music started a lively reel that had couples flooding the makeshift dance floor. Sam immediately dragged Clara out, his enthusiasm making up for his lack of skill. Harold claimed the next dance, showing off the steps she'd taught him. "My turn," Jack said when Harold's dance ended. But instead of another reel, the musicians had switched to a slower waltz. Jack led her onto the floor with quiet confidence. Around them, she sensed people watching, but once they began to move, the world narrowed to just the two of them. "People are staring," Clara murmured. "Let them," Jack said. "Been too long since they had anything good to talk about." They danced in silence for a moment before Jack spoke again. "Thank you. For dancing, it's my pleasure. For bringing us back to life," Jack corrected. "For making us part of the world again instead of hiding from it." "You were never hiding," Clara said. "You were healing. There's a difference." "Maybe, but healing alone takes longer. Hurts more." His hand tightened slightly on her waist. "We're better with you, Clara. All of us." The dance ended before she could respond. Probably for the best, since her throat was tight with emotion. They were immediately swept into the social whirl. Jack pulled into a group of ranchers discussing spring plans. Clara cornered by women wanting her recipe for those light biscuits. It was Sam who changed everything, as children often do with their innocent honesty. The boy had been playing with other children but came running over to where Clara was refilling punch cups. "Miss Clara Timmy Johnson says you can't be our ma because you're not married to Pa. But I said you're already like our ma, and marriage is just paperwork. Right." The women around the punch table fell silent. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, acutely aware of the awkwardness of her position. "Sam," she said gently, "it's more complicated than that." "No, it's not," Sam insisted with 8-year-old certainty. "You take care of us and teach us things and make Pa smile. That's what mas do." "Out of the mouths of babes." "Mrs." Cooper murmured, the judge's wife studying Clara with new interest. Before Clara could figure out how to respond, Jack appeared, clearly having heard the exchange. "Sam's right," he said quietly but clearly. "It's not complicated at all." Then, in front of the entire church social, Jack Callahan dropped to one knee. Clara's hands flew to her mouth, around them. Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. "Clara Jo Whitley," Jack said, his voice steady despite the flush on his cheeks. "I know this is supposed to be a longer courtship. Know you deserve flowers and romance and time. But my son's right, what we have isn't complicated. It's simple, it's good, it's real." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn box. "This was my mother's ring. Been carrying it around for 2 weeks, trying to find the perfect moment. But maybe there's no such thing as perfect. Maybe there's just right. And this feels right." The hall was completely silent now, everyone straining to hear. "You brought light back into our home," Jack continued. "Taught us to laugh again. Showed the boys that life goes on, that joy is possible after loss. Showed me that my heart wasn't buried with Sarah, it was just waiting for you." Clara's vision blurred with tears. Around them, she was dimly aware of faces, some shocked, some delighted, some disapproving. But all that mattered was Jack's weathered face looking up at her with hope and love and a vulnerability that took her breath away. "I'm not asking you to replace anyone," Jack said. "I'm asking you to be yourself, to be Clara, to be my wife. If you'll have me. If you'll have us." "Say yes," Sam shouted, unable to contain himself. "Samuel," someone hushed him, but nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Clara looked at Jack, this good man who'd given her shelter without conditions, who'd stood between her and harm, who'd been patient with her fears and gentle with her heart. She thought of the boys who'd claimed her as family before anyone gave them permission. She thought of mornings in the warm kitchen and evenings by the fire, and a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. "Yes," she said, voice clear and certain. "Yes, I'll marry you. Jack Callahan." The hall erupted in cheers and applause. Jack surged to his feet, sliding the simple gold band onto her finger with shaking hands. Then, in front of God and most of Lark Hollow, he kissed her, brief and proper but full of promise. "About time," someone shouted, and laughter filled the space. Sam and Harold rushed over, Sam throwing his arms around Clara while Harold tried to maintain dignity while grinning widely. "Does this mean you're really our ma now?" Sam asked. "Almost," Clara said, hugging him back. "Soon." "Good," Harold said quietly. "It's good." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and well wishes. Even Mrs. Hollis offered grudging approval, mentioning that short engagements were perfectly acceptable for widowers with children who needed a mother's care. Pastor Williams pulled them aside. "I'd be honored to perform the ceremony. When were you thinking?" Jack looked at Clara. "Your choice. Tomorrow if you want. Or we can wait." 2 weeks, Clara said, surprising herself with the certainty. 2 weeks should be enough time to prepare properly. 2 weeks it is. The pastor agreed, beaming. The first Saturday in March, perfect timing for a new beginning. As they prepared to leave, Clara noticed Sarah's photograph tucked on a shelf near the coat hooks. Someone must have brought it for the historical display about Lark Hollow's founding families. The young woman smiled out from the frame, frozen in time. "Are you all right?" Jack asked quietly, following her gaze. "Yes," Clara said, and meant it. I hope she'd be happy, that the boys are cared for, that you're not alone." "She would be," Jack said with certainty. Sarah had a generous heart. Even when the darkness took her, she'd want us happy. The ride home was quiet, both boys asleep in the back of the wagon despite the early hour, worn out from excitement. Jack reached over and took Clara's hand, thumb brushing over the ring. "Any regrets?" he asked. "About the public proposal, I know it wasn't what you might have wanted." "It was perfect," Clara interrupted. "Not fairy tale perfect, but real life perfect. Our kind of perfect." "Our kind of perfect," Jack repeated. "I like that." As the ranch came into view, Clara felt something settle in her chest, a peace she'd thought lost forever. In 2 weeks, she'd be Clara Callahan. She'd have a husband who treated her with kindness, children who already called her family, a home where laughter was encouraged and love was given freely. "What are you thinking?" Jack asked. "That I came here looking to disappear," Clara said slowly, "to become invisible. Instead, I've never felt more seen, more valued, more myself." "Good," Jack said, squeezing her hand. "Because yourself is exactly who we want, who we need, who we love." Love. The word that had frightened her for so long now felt like coming home. As Jack helped her down from the wagon and they carried the sleeping boys inside together, Clara thought that maybe second chances weren't just possible. Sometimes they were even better than the first. The first Saturday in March dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself blessed the union about to take place. Clara woke in her small attic room for the last time, listening to the familiar sounds of the house stirring Jack's boots on the stairs, the boys' excited whispers, the creak of old wood warming in the morning sun. In 2 hours, she would become Clara Callahan. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Clara," it was Harold, sounding uncharacteristically uncertain. "Can I come in?" "Of course." The boy entered carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This is for you, from me and Sam. For today." Clara unwrapped it carefully, revealing a delicate hair comb adorned with tiny pearl buttons. It was obviously old, carefully cleaned and polished. "It was Ma's," Harold said quietly. "Her special occasion comb. Sam and me thought you should have it, that Ma would want you to have it." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Harold, are you sure?" "Family things should stay in the family," Harold said firmly. "And you're family now. Really family." She hugged him then, this boy who tried so hard to be strong. "Thank you. I'll wear it with pride." "Good," Harold said, returning the embrace briefly before stepping back, cheeks pink. "Sam's downstairs driving Pa crazy with questions about the ceremony. You might want to hurry." After Harold left, Clara dressed carefully in a new dress, pale green wool that brought out her eyes, made by Mrs. Cooper and several other women as a wedding gift. The comb fit perfectly in her carefully arranged hair, a piece of the past blessing the future. Downstairs, she found cheerful chaos. Sam was indeed peppering Jack with questions while trying to eat breakfast and tie his shoes at the same time. Jack himself looked handsome in his dark suit, though he kept tugging at his collar. "You look beautiful," he said when he saw her, then remembered the boys were watching and cleared his throat. "That is, you look very nice." "Pa thinks you look beautiful," Sam announced. "He said so 3 times while you were upstairs." "Thank you, Sam," Jack said dryly, ears reddening. "Very helpful." Clara smiled. Well, I think you all look very handsome. The ride to church passed in a blur of nervous energy. The whole town had turned out. It seemed cramming into the small building until people stood along the walls. Clara saw familiar faces, Mrs. Brennan beaming like a proud mother, Murdoch nodding approvingly, even Mrs. Hollis managing a genuine smile. Pastor Williams waited at the altar, prayer book in hand. The ceremony itself was simple, no fancy flowers or elaborate decorations. Just two people making promises in front of their community. Do you, Jackson Michael Callahan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Jack said, voice strong and certain. Do you, Clara Joe Whitley, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Clara looked at Jack, this good man who'd shown her that kindness wasn't weakness, that love didn't have to hurt. I do. Then, by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. The kiss was sweet and brief, mindful of their audience, but full of promise for all the kisses to come. The church erupted in applause, and Sam's whoop of joy rose above it all. The reception was held in the church hall, the same space where Jack had proposed 2 weeks earlier. This time, Clara moved through the crowd as a wife, accepting congratulations and good wishes with Jack solid beside her. Never seen Jack look so happy, Judge Cooper commented. You've done wonders for that family, Mrs. Callahan. Mrs. Callahan. The name felt strange on her tongue, but right in her heart. As the afternoon wore on, Clara found a quiet moment to step outside for air. The March wind was gentle, carrying the promise of spring. She wasn't surprised when Jack found her there. Overwhelmed, he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. No, Clara said, leaning into him. Just full. My heart feels too full to hold it all. That's good. Right. That's very good. They stood together watching the sun slant across the valley. In the distance, their ranch home waited for them. Clara. Thank you. She turned to look at him. For what? For saying yes, for taking on me and the boys and all our complications, for being brave enough to try again. Clara reached up to touch his face. We're all brave here. That's what makes us family. Before Jack could respond, Sam burst through the door. There you are, Mrs. Murphy says it's time to cut the cake, and you can't cut the cake without the bride and groom. Duty calls, Jack said with a smile, offering Clara his arm. Together, Clara asked. Together, Jack confirmed. The rest of the reception passed in a warm haze of cake and dancing and laughter. As evening fell, they made their farewells, the boys yawning despite their excitement. The ride home was quiet, all of them processing the day's joy. Back at the ranch, Clara started to head to the kitchen out of habit, but Jack caught her hand. No work tonight, he said softly. It's your wedding day. Our wedding day, Clara corrected. And the boys need to get to bed. We can manage, Harold said, trying to sound mature. Come on, Sam. But I want to stay up with Ma and Pa, Sam protested even as he rubbed his eyes. Ma, the word stopped Clara in her tracks. Is that okay? Sam asked uncertainly. Calling you Ma, I know you're not our first Ma, but... It's more than okay, Clara said, kneeling to hug him. It's an honor. Good, Sam said, hugging back fiercely. Because I already told everyone at school that's what I was going to call you. After the boys were settled, Clara and Jack found themselves alone in the parlor. The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. How do you feel? Jack asked. Any regrets? None, Clara said firmly. You? Only that I didn't ask sooner. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, adjusting to this new reality, married, together, family. I've been thinking, Clara said eventually, about your room. Jack tensed slightly. The bedroom he'd shared with Sarah had remained unchanged, a shrine to memory. He'd been sleeping on a cot in the small room off the kitchen since Clara arrived. "What about it?" he asked carefully. I think it's time to make it ours. Not erasing Sarah, but making room for now. For us." Jack was quiet for a long moment. "She would want that," he said finally. "Want us to move forward, not live in the past." "We can do it slowly," Clara offered. "Together." "Together," Jack agreed, the word becoming their touchstone. Later, as Clara unpacked her few belongings in what was now their room, she found herself humming. Jack watched from the doorway, a soft smile on his face. "Happy?" he asked. Clara considered. 6 months ago. She'd arrived in Lark Hollow with nothing but a broken heart and a desperate need to disappear. Now she had a husband who treasured her, children who called her Ma, a home filled with laughter and warmth. "Yes," she said simply, "happier than I ever thought possible." Jack crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "Good, because you deserve all the happiness in the world. Clara Callahan." Clara Callahan. Her new name, her new life, her second chance at love. As Jack held her close and the spring breeze rattled the windows, Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here, the pain and loss that had shaped them, the courage it took to try again, the simple daily choices that built a life together. "What are you thinking?" Jack asked. "That broken things can be mended," Clara said. "That winter always gives way to spring. That sometimes the life you never planned is exactly the one you need." "Speaking of spring," Jack said, "I've been thinking we should expand that garden you mentioned. Maybe add a greenhouse. What do you think?" "I think that sounds perfect," Clara said. "Our kind of perfect." As they talked about plans and dreams and tomorrows, Clara felt the last of her old fears dissolve. She was home not just in this house, but in this life, with this man, with these boys who'd claimed her heart before she'd even known it was available for claiming. Outside, the March wind whispered promises of new growth, of seasons turning, of life continuing its endless cycle of loss and renewal. Inside, the Callahan family complete at last settled into their first night of their new beginning. It was, Clara thought as sleep finally claimed her, a very good beginning indeed. "Just sleep," Jack murmured in the darkness, echoing their first tentative connection. "Darlin," Clara replied, smiling at the memory. "Try me." And in the gentle darkness of their room, with spring knocking at the door and love settling over them like a well-worn quilt, they began the rest of their lives together. Not perfect, perhaps, but real and true and theirs. The winter of their sorrows had finally given way to spring. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where in the world you're enjoying these tales. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts about Clara and Jack's journey. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Wild West Stories 1850 and hitting the like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more listeners discover these authentic stories of love and redemption in the American frontier. Until our next story, partners.